are the Org. Our mission is to assimilate Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and beer. Lots of beer.
Hello, friend. Welcome to bOrgCast 12.7 with me, I'm Anne-Marie, and he's Peter, and we've had beer.
Yes, we have. Hello. We've also had a bit of...
Last time on Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, from 12.6's discussion of New Sydney in Prodigal Daughter, which sounded a bit strange considering they weren't part of the Federation.
Yep.
Purry suggested that they were a colony of disgruntled Federation citizens who'd left in order to make some money.
Okay.
But who then, of course, were vulnerable to mafia-type organisations preying on them, which I guess makes some sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if they were started by the dude who kept calling Captain Picard.
What? I mean, that's familiar to me, but that I don't remember what episode that was in.
He was a stockbroker or something on Next Gen.
Oh my gosh, you mean that season 1 episode, for heaven's sake? Neutral Zone. With a guy who, yes, the deep frozen stockbroker. Wow, that's a callback. Okay.
Sorry.
Possibly. That'd be the sort of thing the books did. Yeah, it would be him responsible for it. Yeah. Anyway, on to tonight's Season 7 episode of Deep Space Nine at the other end of the timeline.
Sorry.
And we're looking at Field of Fire.
An assassin is on the loose.
He was shot through the heart.
And the manhunt seems hopeless.
There is someone who could help, but I don't want to ask him.
Now, to catch a killer, Ezri must become one.
You murdered 3 people. I don't want anything to do with you.
But when she confronts the truth about herself...
You're part of me.
I'm nothing like you. No!
On the next Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
So, it's a lieutenant's party. And everybody
Lieutenant
knows...
Redshirt, yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of the Mitchell of the week. Really.
Oh.
Well, no, it wasn't Mitchell. It was, what was the other name? And it was just one day off of retirement. And I can't, but you know what I mean? It's that kind of... It's blatantly a bloke who is about to be...
The clock is ticking straight away, isn't it, for him?
Isn't it?
Well, basically, it's a countdown till the teaser, because the teaser is he's dead. Oh, what a shocker!
Yeah, and there's an actual proper piss up, which I like, where they're drinking sorry and brandy.
Yeah,
and he's drunk. I like that. Yeah. I like that bit. But yeah, like you said, there's various conversations with him in, and then there's a security alert, and he's been shot.
Yes.
So, and
what
then
a surprise.
After the teaser, you have Bashir going, he was
shot to the heart, and you're too late, darling, you give love a bad name.
Sorry. Yeah, that's a fairly predictable tune for this one, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it is a bit. Imagine
what more of an impact this would have had if this lieutenant dude had actually cropped up before now for a few episodes. Unlikely to recognise it. I only recognised his name on IMDb from one other thing, which is a season, I think, is it Gropo's? Is season 2 of Babylon 5? Season 1 or season 2? I think it's season 2. And he played one of the privates in that, so to speak.
Private Gropo.
Private Gropo, yes.
Right, no, I hadn't got a clue who he was, sorry.
Well, not that it mattered, because, it's a fairly... Well, no, he does crop up later, having been dead, doesn't he, to be fair, but... Yeah.
So, he was shot, they've got a bullet from a TR-116 rifle. Except what they call a bullet, it looks like a fucking Petri dish or something. It's a massive thing that Odo walks out with.
I think the bullet's inside the Petri dish thing.
Okay.
I think it's like a sample container, so yeah.
Oh, okay, fair
that doesn't look much like a bullet, that plastic thing.
No. And they say there's no powder burns, but it was at close range. So they're like slightly confused by it. So then you're on a detective jolly.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got this conversation in front of the torpedo coffin with the flag on between Ezri and Bashir, and he's like, taking a life like that, I don't know what it's like. And she's like, well, I know exactly what it's like, because she's thinking of Duran Duran.
Mm-hmm.
Her name is Rio, and she dances on the sand.
And she has nightmares, and I like the way the nightmares are shot in this episode.
Yes, no, they sort of crank the camera or whatever the equivalent is to make it look sort of juddery, basically, doesn't it? That's quite effective,
which I like.
Yes, we get our new version of Duran. It's not the same actor. Originally,
I didn't think he looked like him.
No, nothing like. Jeff Magnus McBride was the original guy. But
and didn't he have dark hair?
I think so, yeah. He looked just like what?
Totally different.
Totally
basically.
different. Apparently he wasn't available, so they couldn't use him again for that reason. Fair enough. Can't help that. But yeah, they employ somebody who looks nothing like him. Lee J. McCloskey, who was also in an episode of Voyager. Played one of the NAF rogue telepaths in season 5 of Babylon 5, so it's a Babylon 5 week this week. Blimey. And was also apparently in season 1 of Buck Rogers, but apparently he's best known for his regular role on Leave It to Beaver, which is a show that never made it over here for some reason. I can't think why. I find him a bit out on the nose, basically. He's creepy McCreepington Dax, and he's not very effective at it either. So you remember that really creepy performance Avery Brooks did as Duran? In that episode where various people take on the various hosts. That I would have far rather they got Avery Brooks to do it, to be honest. He was much better.
Yeah. Or just someone who could be more menacing as distinct from aggressive.
Yeah,
It just seems wrong. Do you know what I mean? He seems to be playing the whole thing wrong to me.
Yes, it's not creepy. It's you're right. It's aggressive, actually, if anything, isn't it?
And it should be menacing.
Yeah.
And it isn't. I don't find it menacing anyway. So she has this nightmare, and then she's woken up because there's been another murder, and this one is Greta, a wimberwet, a wimberwet, a wimberwet, a wimberwet.
What now?
I couldn't catch the name. I listened 3 times, and it just sounded to me like a wimberway.
Okay. Right, I'm going to have to look that up now, because I didn't make a note of her name.
I'm
pretty sure it wasn't a wimberway, though.
No, it's one of those things where I knew it wasn't a wimberway.
Funny, that.
But the moment I was earworm with a Wimberway, and it was a bit like Wimberway or something like that, or Vandervalk or something, and I don't really know, and it didn't stick in my head, and I don't know who she is. Sorry. And it's like, what have these 2 murders got in common? How are we going to catch them, whatever? So then you've got O'Brien and Bashir, and they're eating... I'm not sure what they're eating.
It's Greta van der Weg.
Right.
Yes. Who's presumably from some Scandinavian country, judging by that name, I would have thought.
Dutch would be my guess.
Yes, there we are.
Anyway. And then you have Bashir talking about...
Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier.
And about how he set everything up with this pans for ricochets or whatever. And you have Miles going, displace targeting, that's it. And so he knows how the killer did it. So then he summons Dax and Odo to a room with a melon in it, and as you have the command, step away from the melon.
Yeah, Odo says, nice melon. It was a watermelon which had been dyed purple, then injected with dyed rice pudding, which is why all that slurpy stuff comes out when they shoot it.
Yep. Well, it's quite effective.
Don't think much of the visors, by the way. As a follow-on from the hard hats last week.
Yeah.
These are blatantly just your average visor you get today with a bit of silver paper on it. Wow, that makes them futuristic.
Yeah, but surely if something works, why is there an incentive? If necessity is the mother of invention and there is no necessity to improve, I guess you're going to keep it the way it is.
We just expect futuristic-looking things from Star Trek, so when they do find blatantly a prop that's something that we have today, it doesn't look right, basically.
What about wheels? The wheel has not changed.
No, they don't really use wheels, with the exception of Nemesis, where Picard gets his buggy, which again doesn't work because they don't generally have cars either. It's just like.
But you think about how many hundreds of years the wheel has been around. Have we really changed it that much?
I can see the argument, and we kind of had this last time as well about the hard hat. It's like, why do you need a different sort of hard hat? But at least with the hard hat, you could say, well, it could have a built-in comm system stuff. I guess with a face guard, it really just needs to be a bit of plastic to protect your eyes. That's perfectly adequate. The problem is it's exactly the same design that everybody uses today. So as a result, it just takes me out of it because it doesn't look. Everything else is custom designed. When they use something that's clearly just something off the shelves from today, it just feels wrong. I can see your logic, don't get me wrong, it's just a gut response. They don't use pens, they use pads. You see, everything is futuristic.
But what I'm saying is, you think how many years further into the future DS9 is from us, and then you go back that time the other way, what has changed? Has it changed enough? When is things there? 24th century, we're 21st, so 300 years. So were they using pens 300 years ago? Were they still using quills?
Yeah, they weren't using pens. Certainly not pens like they look like today. Things change, you see. That's
some
the
things
thing.
do, but some things don't. Again,
No. Design of most things change. I can't. On the top of my head, I can't think of anything that hasn't changed much, other than perhaps a Marmite jar. That's about the most unchanging thing I can think of. And let's face it, they ain't that old. So.
Well, they got plastic.
And now they've got plastic squeezy versions now. Yes.
Yeah. So
everything changes over time. No. Everything changes over time. Even if we're still using wheels, wheels of cars now don't look like wheels of cars did even 10 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, things were mechanised, but you're right. Wheels look different on things now to they did 300 years ago.
Yeah, even styles of things, Jess. So even if they're using visors, which yes, understandandly they would be, the style is going to look different.
Thing.
Yeah.
No, that works. That makes sense. So in other words, Can we move on from the visors now? Because I can hear the snores from our listeners. Sorry.
And it's partly my fault. I brought it up.
Yes. Anyway, O'Brien is able to explode the melon.
Yes, for now. Exploding the melon. Oh, yeah.
Exploding my melon, man. I suppose we could play out to that.
Yeah, we could, yeah.
There's a headset thing that allows you to see through walls, which this day and age wouldn't work, but 300 years into the future, you can.
Yeah, that's cool. And they actually built some special sets that recreated the look of looking through a wall, and that works really well.
So I kind of like that idea. And then there's a micro transporter, so you fire the bullet, and then it continues its trajectory. That's the bit I struggle with.
Yeah, I know, it doesn't seem right, does it? That you transport the bullets, and then obviously it beams up wherever you want it to beam, and it's still got the inertia.
Somehow has the velocity.
So it's a transporter. Not only does it transmit matter, but it also transmits velocity.
Force? Velocity?
Yeah.
Right,
does it?
I was always shit at physics. I'm hoping there are people listening to this who are not shit at physics, who can tell us whether this might be a theoretical possibility or utter bollocks.
Yes, I'm sure we'll hear from somebody.
Yes, whoever you are, in advance, thank you.
Because we're getting sleepless nights and stuff. Well, actually, no, I'm getting sleepless nights about the visors, but anyway.
Yeah, right, and the hard hats. And then, just total aside, but you see it in the background in the scene, and it's sweet. Morn has a date.
Yay! He's pulled!
And then you've got Esri freaking out a little bit. Someone's following her. It turns out to be Worf, who's following her, to make sure she's safe.
I quite like that scene.
Which is
quite
sweet.
Nice, yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, you're sweet." And then he's like, "Well, I would have done it for anyone else." And she's like, "Of course."
That's right.
Yes. And then he's like, "If there's anything I can do," and she's like, "No, there isn't." And then he looks at her, and then it's like, "Yeah, there is something, but it won't be nice." And then he looks at her and says, "You will do whatever needs to be done." And she's like, "How do you know?" And he's like, "Because you're Dax," which I like, and I like that he's, however difficult he finds everything, he's acknowledging that she is Dax, which I like.
Yeah, it feels like he's moved on, which is good.
And then she does the Jantara ritual.
Well, I don't think it is. I think this is a different ritual.
Probably a different one.
But literally, the writers described this as trill mumbo jumbo, and yeah, it's very convenient they can do this sort of thing. Originally, when it was written, she would go to the holosuite and talk to a recreation of Duran, which obviously is a bit more scientific. But they found that too limiting, because obviously you couldn't wander around the station with her, so they go the mumbo jumbo route instead. I suspect this may put some people's backs up, but it doesn't bother me too much. But it just seems a bit weird, doesn't it? It's like Star Trek doesn't normally deal with this sort of level of effectively space magic, isn't it?
Yeah. It looks initially like there's another person there, but there isn't. It's all in Dax.
No,
he actually says it's all in your
exactly.
Your mind.
Nobody else can see him, which leads to some interesting scenes when she's talking to him, and people sort of wander past and look at her like, "Why are you talking to yourself like that?" And even Quark even mentions it.
So it's almost like some kind of deliberate schizophrenia or a deliberate multiple personality disorder. In that she's already got those multiple personalities in the virtue of being a
I think
trill.
it would work better if she didn't have to go through the weird bubbly vat of strangeness, staring into a mirror and speak his name 3 times type thing.
He's a bit fucked up Candyman, isn't it?
Isn't it? Because, I mean, it could all be kind of in her head, her communicating with him, which would seem reasonable without needing the ritual to start it all off, really. Maybe just a sort of meditation and then she's away. But I guess that's not very exciting visually, is it? So, who'd have thought I'd ever be arguing for less ritual in something?
I think the only thing that... Well, there's two things I think that help the concept for me. Mm-hmm. One is that she isn't human. So we know she's got these other personalities inside her. And because that's been set up for so long that this is part of being her species... Yeah,
and it obviously it follows on from... what was the one where they all appeared?
I know the one you mean. The ritual then was called the Jantara ritual, but I don't remember what the episode was called. So I'm able to suspend my disbelief because of that, because this hasn't come out of nowhere. The idea of the multiple personalities and talking to them or whatever. The other aspect that works for me a bit, but I think they could have done something more with it, is there seems to be some kind of that goo, and that's what she's lighting or something, doesn't it?
Yeah, she's heating up some goo, but she doesn't drink it or anything, it just gives off smoke.
And it's like, for me, the goo helps, but that's where for me it falls down, that she should be doing something more with the goo, like you said, like drinking it. And then the ritual words would be part of the tradition. It's
facets, by the way, the one.
Cool.
The Jantara, yeah.
Thank you. And then the ritual words would then be part of that, and I would then be more able to suspend my disbelief from that point on if she drunk the goo or put it on herself.
Yeah, because then she'd be tripping, basically. Yeah,
basically deliberate, but with the deliberate intention of a ritual.
Putting her in touch with...
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that would work as well. Yeah.
But there would have had to been contact. And it, for me, I think that's where it falls down. That the way it's shot...
It's just magic words is the way it comes across, isn't it?
And it's like your eye is drawn to the goo and then nothing happens with it. And that, for me, I think is a disconnect.
Yeah.
But... he does this whole thing of you need to hold the weapon in your hands and feel what it felt like. How do you feel? And she says calm and powerful and controlled attached.
Bless, the rifle's almost as big as she is.
Yeah. He says pull the trigger, and like she freaks out, but the gun isn't loaded. But I'd have freaked as well, because the way he's trying to goad her. And then he says, think about the situation, what connects them. They're looking around the quarters and seeking commonalities.
But again, he's being bossy about it rather than...
Yeah, he should
be seductive
and menacing.
Yeah, and you know, so persuasive and honey-tongued, persuading her that way instead of, do it! Get on, do it! Or just do it! What was that idiot actor that did that thing? Oh.
You're really narrowing it down.
The guy who was in Transformers, but whose career went spectacularly off the rails.
Wow.
You know, we played Buster Witwick in the Transformer movies.
No, I don't know who Buster Witwick is.
The guy who was in the Indiana Jones film, which we don't mention because it never existed.
Yeah, the one who the only name I know from it is Harrison Ford. Oh, do you mean Shitty LaBeouf?
Yes, Shitty LaBeouf, yes.
Right.
He did those whole series of Just Do It videos.
Did he?
Yeah.
What for?
Ask our daughter about. She knows all about them, so...
Okay.
And what for was the interesting question. I think it was part of his meltdown, but there we go.
Oh, right. He isn't menacing. He isn't manipulative. It's not just that this dude doesn't look like t'other dude. The performance is so different that you don't think they're the same person. Then there's this Ensign Bertram, who we've definitely seen around. I definitely recognise his face. I'm sure he's been in as a background.
Nope.
Well, he might not have said anything, but I've seen his face. And they're trying to nab him, and she kicks the chair over. Oh, hang on, we've got a...
Do it!
What the fuck?
Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday, you said tomorrow, so just do it! Make your dreams come true!
No, my dreams are fucked up! My dreams are not coming true. Fuck off.
Some people dream of success while you're going to wake up and work hard at it. Nothing is impossible.
Fly?
Yes. I can't breathe underwater. I'd love to.
Quit, and you're not going to stop there. No, what are you waiting for?
You should shut the fuck up. Well, if you gave me a gun, I'd shoot you.
Do it. Yes, you can.
No, I don't have a gun. I can't breathe underwater.
If you're tired of starting over...
No, I'm tired of you.
Giving up.
What's with the whole bendy crotch bollocks?
I think he crapped his pants.
That was awful.
And the stupidest thing about it is he did it in front of a green screen, so that people just made 1,000,001 different parodies of it, just, the way that you can composite stuff on behind him.
What a plonker. Anyway, Dax deliberately kicks a chair over so Ensign Burton trips up. That's fair enough. But then basically she goes to knife him. And Duran wants her to put the knife in. She doesn't. And she's called in front of Cisco and she's like, just give me some time. And she doesn't mention Duran. And he's like, you should have told him. And she's like, no, he'd have shut this down straight away. And she goes to put Duran back in the cupboard, as it were. But there's another murder, and this time it's a Bolian. And then she makes the connection with the pictures of the laughing faces. So it must be
his wife and co-husband, interestingly.
Yeah.
It was quite nice.
And this person must be a Vulcan who hates emotion and what it represents about losing control, and laughter mocks him. And then they're in the lift, and Duran's like, it's the lift Vulcan.
Yeah, I know. Up till now, the story's pretty cleverly put together, but it all hinges on exactly... They say there are 48 Vulcans on the station, which seems quite a lot.
They've then narrowed it down to 28 by this point.
Yeah, but nevertheless, the one out of the 48 Vulcans happens to step in the turbo lift with them. It's like, it's him! It's like, well, that's jolly convenient, isn't it?
Yeah.
You had a 1 in 48 chance. Wow.
Yeah, it's Lift Vulcan.
Lift Vulcan.
And then...
Well, we're told what his job is. Perhaps this is his job. He's just the lift maintenance guy. No, he's got science on, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a scientific Vulcan.
And he's called Lieutenant Chulak, which is a bizarre Vulcan name. I mean, for ages it was just S's. And then we had Tuvok, which they ran out of S names, so they moved on to T. That's fair enough.
Well, you got to POW, hadn't you?
Yeah. The women generally had T names, yeah. But by the time you get to Voyager, the men have run out of S's, so you got Tuvok. But yeah, now suddenly we've got Chulok. What? That's a Vulcan name now, is it? Bizarre.
Well, they put an apostrophe in it.
Yeah, doesn't mean that it doesn't sound right because it's not an S or a T.
Okay.
Oh, the things we get annoyed about.
Well, I don't. Just you.
Okay. Is it just me? Please tell me it's not just me.
Well, there's bound to be somebody who listens to this who also gets annoyed by it.
I bet Drew's got him as a captain for one of his Vulcan ships.
I wonder, actually, but it's possible. And then they're like, oh, he suffered a big loss. He was one of only 6 survivors of a crew of 1,250.
On the Grissom. It's not... To tell you what, it's not good if your ship's called Grissom in Star Trek. Because the previous Grissom we saw was in Star Trek 3, getting blown up by the Klingons.
Okay.
It's the ship that you really hate that's got the canoe at the bottom.
Oh, I hate that thing.
I mean, presumably this is just a completely different... Well, obviously it's a completely different ship because the previous one was blown up, but not necessarily an Oberth class. It could be anything else, unless it's a Grissom A or B or something.
Okay. So, Dax uses the sight from the rifle to find him. Now, that makes sense.
Nicely tense, that works well.
And then Duran is like, shoot her, shoot her, shoot her. And she does, making him miss her and fire at the wall. But why does she not shoot his knee or something that would still make him collapse in pain?
I don't know, it was all very tense and exciting stuff, so I didn't care much about that. I do wonder why there's gas escaping from the wall behind her. That's a bit worrying.
Yeah, well, it's because it's a high-velocity projectile that's been fired.
Projectile? I think you mean projectile.
Is it?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know. I did say earlier on physics was not my thing, didn't I? I don't know. Bullet.
Yeah, that would be the projectile that is fired at the trajectory.
Yeah.
How's?
Yeah, so you can criticise me.
I can. I just did.
Fine.
Look how that made me look.
And then it's like, why did you do it? And he's like, logic demanded it, which reminds me of the fucked up Vulcans from Enterprise.
Yeah, and that Vulcan in
Discovery, who was a twat.
Yeah, and I was thinking the one in Next Generation, who's effectively a religious extremist, isn't she? She's played by Robin Curtis, is it? Who was the second Savick It's the one where it's got the space pirate guy.
Na.
Yeah. And with the mullet, the guy who was in a lot of episodes of the A-Team.
Oh, the outrageous whatever it was.
No, that was much earlier on.
Oh,
wrong mullet.
Wow.
This was a bad guy.
The wrong mullet, Gromit.
Oh my gosh. What is becoming of us? We really need to end this podcast soon because we've been doing it so long, we're going senile. And now the one with that guy with the mullet. Oh, I remember it well. It's the one where they discover that it's a artifact, and Picard goes undercover pretending to be another mercenary, and then Riker ends up on the ship, and Riker has to pretend he doesn't know Picard, and they try and start.
The one with that dude.
Oh god, yeah, that's what I said. The dude with the mullet.
Oh.
And there's the Vulcan, who turns out to be the main baddie in it. And she's effectively a religious extremist about logic.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we remembered that then.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Do you remember the one where Picard went down the hill in the bathtub? Or when Troy had all those wrinkled stockings on. Oh.
Anyway, after he's gone logic demanded it, Duran is inciting Dax to shoot, but she doesn't and calls the infirmary. And then she does the ritual thing to put him back in the cupboard. And he says,
"Not going back in the box. Don't go back in the box."
I'm as much a part of you now as the others, which is bollocks, really, because he didn't have the symbiont for as long as half the others.
No.
And she just says, "I'll be careful." And if he's going to be as much a part of her now as all the others, what about that bloke who stole the Dax symbiont?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's the truly forgotten host, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not bad. As I say, the biggest problem really is that scene where they bump into the right Vulcan in the lift. That's like, oh, come on. You're running out of time. Quick, how can we narrow it down? Let's bump into him in a lift.
Yeah. Which they would have, because it was doing really well as a detective thing
Yeah.
up until that point, and they needed to be a better way.
Yeah, it did really, didn't it? It also suffers a bit from being another Esri story, but at least it's miles better than Prodigal Daughter.
Yeah, and it suffers from the fact that the guy playing Duran plays him wrong.
Yes. So it's okay, but could do better.
Yes. Could try harder.
Yes. Let's find out what other people thought. So before people start tweeting in, we've established it was Gambit that we were desperately trying to think of the name of, and the character was Bran with the mullet, but there we go. Anyways, with that out the way, let's hear from Doreen. Hello, writers. Do you remember what there's a war on? Remember you and your team wrote about the Dominion trying to invade the Alpha Quadrant? Anyway, this was a reasonable episode about Dax and the Trill. I tend to like a murder mystery. By the way, I didn't take pleasure in Nog's PTSD, I just appreciated the hopeful ending. And it's a similar thing with this one when Esri manages to overcome Tobin's influence, I think she means Durand, and not kill the unnamed Vulcan. Not that I should have expected anything else. I wonder what the range of those guns are. Don't know. Presumably not infinite, because there's not an infinite range on transporters as it is.
No, yeah, so...
And it's a tiny wee transporter that is wide onto it, so...
Not that far, I would think.
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
And we've heard from the Mark, who writes, Field of Fire or Silence of the Melons. Field of Fire was a supplement in the 1980s when tabletop role-playing game Shadowrun changed and birthed an entire style of play that's now become known as Mirror Shades, as opposed to the pink mohawk style of the game's first edition. Unfortunately, we're not here to talk about that key moment of gaming history, but the mediocre episode of DS9 that starts with a good homicide investigation and falls off a cliff so fast you think it was a robot called Cliffjumper. I just don't get the change of Durandax from an effeminate late 20s creep to a 50-something Hannibal Lecter type. Yeah, it's the same...
Yeah, and he's not even a good Hannibal Lecter type either. He's a pale comparison. It
has a super weak ending with smiling faces triggering a Vulcan who does what every Vulcan on DS9 does and acts illogical but states it was logical.
Yeah.
Yet again, a villain who happened to be Vulcan, but villains all because they were Vulcan. PTSD not taken into account by Starfleet once again. And speaking of illogical, the TR-116 rifle, prototyped and then abandoned. Yeah, right, what a weapon. Can you say assassination, fired from concealment, no energy discharge, and range limited by transporter? Hide in your bunker and kill with no risk. Now, I think he fixed the transporter to it. I don't think...
That wasn't part of the original design. It was O'Brien being creative, and ultimately the Vulcan being creative as well. Adding that feature in, yes.
Also, hang on, what are 900 Starfleet officers doing on Deep Space Nine?
Yeah, that does seem like a stupidly crazy amount, yeah.
We started off with, 15 to 20, and that number's shot up. And I know there's a war on, but that leap has been hidden well on screen.
Yeah, indeed.
And if we have lieutenant commanders running around the station, why is the newly minted Lieutenant Junior Grade Dax a senior officer? And the fact my brain has gone to things like this and obscure RPGs tells you the impact this episode had.
I think it's the same. I mean, obviously, O'Brien isn't a senior officer either, but he has a senior post.
Yeah.
And effectively, as ship's counsellor,
Well, she has a senior
stations
post.
counsellor even, she has a senior post as well. So it's not necessarily always your rank, it's what you do.
The role.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We've heard from Purry the Pie Man.
Hello, Orgs. Purry here to talk about... Yeah, sorry. Title brings me to a big country kind of place. So yeah, you're sadly getting singing rather than me actually subbing in proper music, because I'm in York again. So this episode, it's not a bad episode per se, and actually both these episodes have a similar problem to the ones that we had last time. So the first issue with this one is, the plot is basically... Ezri is trying to find a serial killer, and the things I liked. So the TR-116, it crops up in a lot of fan stuff and a lot of expanded universe things. Oddly enough, quite a few people saw a Federation gun, like proper gun, and particularly one that could fire through walls, as something that was a bit neat. So obviously that's popped up in a few other places. So it gave us that. And we do get a bit more of Duran Duran.
Her name is Rio and she dances on the stand.
I found this episode quite musical in there, but yes, it's Duran, so she goes and gets him out to kind of do a Silence of the Lambs Hannibal Lecter thing. And apparently in any dreams and flashback he's in look awfully like a sort of late 80s, early 90s music video, because that's what that made me think. I thought at some point we should have something over it, possibly some Duran Duran. So anyway, yeah, he keeps reminding her that there's a killer on the loose, which did make me think of the song Killer on the Loose, but I can't quite remember how to sing that. But the episode opens, so what kind of gets me? So the episode opens, and we have Ensign Dead Meat. I can't remember his actual name, because... he's not quite a Mitchell. They were trying to almost make him. He's like, yeah, he's lovely. Look, here's this guy. Everyone likes him. Oh, isn't he nice? What a cheeky chappy he is. Yeah, everyone loves him. Good helmsman. Oh, yeah, you were brilliant, Ensign Deadmeat. And he goes back to quarters and absolutely hammered. And then the next morning they find he's been...
Shot to the heart, and you're too late, darling. You give love a bad name.
Of course, she isn't to blame. It's a Vulcan who's suffering from post-traumatic stress and Starfleet standard issue, very poor post-trauma counselling. And I think that's the issue, is the episode itself isn't bad. It does come up with some quite good tension. I think it manages the tension of, is Duran taking control quite well. Although, and you can sort of see, if you wanted to scientificise it, this is a kind of a trill thing to bring one host to the fore, and for all that there's like ceremony and words, I suppose it would just be almost a meditation technique, so it kind of fits. But ultimately, there's twofold problem in this. One of them is we never see this really, really useful weapon again, up until, obviously any expanded fiction, in which case it turns up every 5 minutes. But the other thing is, again, where's the big plot? The momentum's really come out again. It's not a bad episode. bit too many 80s flashbacks. Duran gets on your nerves a bit. Like I say, it's his thing, and kill someone, kill, and I think Ezri should have probably told Cisco that she's doing that, but because Cisco is kind of, hey Ezri, you got a bit stabby there. Want to explain why? And she's going, oh, just a bit caught up in the investigation, Ben. You know how it is. But overall, it's like I say, it's not a bad episode. It's just at this point in the story, I'm wanting the story, like the main arc plot, which we've just not seen hide nor hair of since 4 episodes ago now. And so we're kind of missing it. And that's really kind of annoying because it is taking, again, we had momentum, things were moving, and it's just stalled again. It's like driving a car with a bad clutch or a missing gear. So yeah, not a terrible episode per se, but I'd have appreciated this maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, rather than now. And it's not fantastic. It's okay at best. It's a decent enough episode, but it's not one that you maybe again go and revisit for the whole episode. So yeah, it's kind of a bit weird like that. But again, maybe I'd have appreciated it more if this was a third season episodes. This will be a theme. So I'll be back shortly to talk about Chimera. Until then, bye for now.
Bye, thank you all.
But you're right, though, Purry, about never seeing that really useful weapon again.
Yeah, although it's not really their style, is it? I mean, it's a sort of sneaky weapon of city. You could expect the Romulans using that, but not so much the Federation, really. It's an assassination weapon. They don't really do assassination, so...
Yeah, but can you not see a use in the field in the, war that they've forgotten about?
Not so much, no, because all they're fighting is about an opponent that comes running at them in large numbers. This is a weapon that relies upon you being some distance away, sneaking around with your vision goggles on. It's not the same sort of thing, is it? So I don't think... It's like you don't get assassins on the front line. They're usually going out to find somebody to kill them, or hence being assassins.
No, okay, fair enough. I'm just thinking, that one, I think it was Siege of AR 558, if the crew there had them weapons, they'd have been able to shoot the Jemadar without being shot themselves. Because they could have seen them coming by monitoring the thing.
Again, it depends on the range of the weapon, doesn't it? But they'd have been able to take some of them out, yes. But I think the sheer numbers of Jemadar they were dealing with would have made... Yeah.
Okay.
Plus, how much damage is one bullet going to do to a Jemadar? Don't know. But anyway... That's not so much of a problem for me. The lack of momentum is a problem, undoubtedly. Particularly coming after a couple of episodes where, there's been no mention of Ziminu more either. Yeah. So, yeah, it just seems like more... I don't know what they were thinking beyond the fact that they knew they were going to be doing a 9-episode arc to finish the season off, so they felt like they had to do loads of individual stories.
Well, I think they were made to.
Yeah. Well, no, I think they were doing it to ensure that they could get away with the 9 at the end. So, unfortunately, it's kind of a result of the format... They could only stretch it so far. Hey-ho.
Hey-ho. What did Drew and Tracy make of this one?
So this is our feedback for Field of Fire.
Yes, it is.
This was really good.
Yeah, it was alright.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Why? Why was it not right? This was like the most kind of intense and engaging episode of Deep Space Nine I've seen for a little while.
Okay, fair enough. I'm not saying it wasn't. But yeah, it was alright. I think the first thing is, it was another Dax episode. It's like season 7 is loads of Dax episodes.
But did you not say they're trying to build up her character and kind of ingrain her in the series?
I don't know if they're doing that. I mean, it seems that way. They're like, we got a new character, let's just do loads of episodes about her.
But then, I am kind of coming around because I wasn't kind of an Esri fan
when it first came in.
I'm not saying she's
not good, yeah.
But she is good. She's like a psychologist, and she's a trill, and she's kind of keeping them all on her toes, isn't she?
Yep. As soon as that guy, come on, what was
Ilario,
his name? Ilario. As you said, as soon as
you saw him, and he was like, Bashir was bigging him up. You're like,
he's gonna die.
He's gonna die. Yeah, we fucking knew that. It was almost like it was, he needed to wear a red shirt because you knew that he was gonna pop it.
Yep.
And it was quite. They could have kind of done a twist when the female officer died, and they were trying to then find a connection. I did say to you, they might have been having an affair.
Yes, you did say that.
But then they kind of like changed that and made it a bit boring that a Vulcan killed him. See, that's understood. Logic tells me
Logic dictates.
Yeah,
it,
why?
say?
Because
I
they're
don't know.
smiley. You don't get to the bottom of why he actually did it.
No, I know. This is another thing about it. I think there's a bit of a flaw in the episode. Was the guy's name Duran? Was that the murderer? When they're in the lift and the Vulcan gets in and he's like looking closer and he says, "Oh, this is him. I know it's him." I mean, look, there was no reason for it. There was no proof or evidence, was there? And it just happened. It did happen to be.
So
him.
they're kind of almost implying that a killer can spot a killer.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason for it, is there?
No, there was nothing in there. Look in his eyes. Look in his eyes.
Yeah.
No, Vulcans are just deadpan anyway.
Yeah.
So there was nothing in like the attitude that would have kind of given it away.
No.
So Odo said there's 900 Starfleet officers aboard Deep Space Nine. Where the fuck are they? Because we only ever see the same people.
Well, so some of them are like cleaning the toilets.
Well, they must be.
Sweeping the habitat
officer
room.
is going to be.
Yeah, there might be. Or like tightening the self-sealing stem bolts.
But I was just like, when he said that, I was like, well, why do we only ever see the same fucking people?
Well, that's just the same as Enterprise, isn't it? You only ever see
And did they not say
Troy
that there was...
and Crusher and Riker and that? Like, you don't see like the person who
the B crew,
cleans
the
gunk out the chicken soup machine, do you?
But it's a replicator, love.
Yeah,
There is
you
no
know,
gun.
yeah.
Even I know that.
Yeah.
But he did say that there was like 49 Vulcans.
Yeah, something like
on
that,
Deep Space
48, I think, but yeah.
Where the fuck are they?
You're just sideline characters. You don't see.
I'm sorry, I need proof. I need like more character development than if there's 900 officers on board Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
I just found that quite fascinating.
I can remember seeing this one at Pages. I know that's our catchphrase all of a sudden. Do you not remember? I can't remember the details. I couldn't even have told you that Ezri Dax was in it, but it was the bit at the end. I just remembered when she was looking through the thing that they both end up looking at each other.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember that?
No.
And I think I can remember the fact that the rifle was like a transporter. But that was about it.
A transporter?
Well, it transported the bullet, didn't it? Through the bulkheads,
okay.
if you remember.
Yeah,
But I thought it was good.
Don't ever fucking ask me if I remember something from Pages.
I know,
I was just drunk on Romulan Ale and
Yes,
kind of going to
exactly.
sleep in a cooler, I think.
But yeah, I thought it was an okay episode.
I enjoyed it.
It's alright, yeah.
I thought it was quite engaging. It was a good Ezri episode. I'm kind of warming to her now.
Not bad.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Good, enjoyable stuff.
Yeah, I did think it was funny, Miles and Bashir, at the beginning when they were talking to Ilario and he was like, "Oh, I'd really like to come to the hospital."
Yeah.
They're like,
No.
Don't ever say that. No, never going to happen.
Yeah.
That was quite good. They are a good comedy act.
They
I
are.
like them. Anyway, leave it there.
Yes, indeed.
Coolio, let's have another one.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. I have a theory. I've been thinking about the 49 Vulcans we don't see and the 900 Starfleet officers we don't see.
And then you've got to add in the non-commissioned officers on top of that. They're the ones who are cleaning out the chicken soup machines, the replicators.
Yeah.
So 900 doesn't sound right at all.
Well, I'm just thinking, are they people whose ships are docked?
Could be just that they're at war at the moment, so they've got more people on board.
And the ships will have a lot of people on board potentially. Now, they're not all on the station at the same time because the station isn't big enough. Some of them will be sleeping on the ship, but they have access to the station. So at any given time, they could be on the station. And so you can't rule out the people who are on the ships because they are free. They have freedom of movement. That's my guess.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a guess. And yeah, you're right. There is no evidence that it's him other than look in his eyes.
Yeah, it's just silly, that bit.
It is.
Hey ho. And we've heard from the Llama God.
Llama God's log, Scott Date, Objake, Noi, Tree. Shot to the heart. But who's to blame? You give logic a bad name. Yeah, okay, don't worry, I'm not gonna do the whole song, especially not like that. I think you've all suffered from my attempts at this sort of thing more than enough in the past, so stand down. So yes, this episode starts promisingly enough, doesn't it? With a toast to Ensign Mitchell, picking up a character who's never been seen before, so what are the chances that he'll make it to the end of the episode alive? About none. The main thing that surprised me about that whole slightly cringeworthy introduction of this episode was that we knew he was going to be killed off, but I didn't realise he was going to be killed off quite that soon in the episode. And it starts off in a little sort of odd, slightly meandering way. One of the more interesting points is where either Bashir or O'Brien, I can't actually remember right now, but one of them makes the question of what are powder burns when it's revealed that the poor Ensign Mitchell has been shot. And it's strange they wouldn't know that, because obviously both he and O'Brien spent a lot of time in historical drama, so you would have thought they would have known that sort of thing. Of course, they could well be playing sanitised versions of adventures, which are fun for all the family, so there's probably no blood or guts. People just get shot and fall over. So that's probably how they can wind down with a bit of senseless killing during the day. No danger, no blood, no guts. No fun. Never mind. But at the same time, it wasn't at all odd that Odo was the one to know the answer, because, well, I mean, even despite having to make up the excuses of reading all those historical novels, he's going to be the person to have that sort of knowledge. And there's a bit of nonsense with them teleporting bullets. I mean, that's actually quite a really nice little idea and make for a really good and interesting computer game. It's a very simple idea too, and it's a nice sort of marriage of a couple of technologies in Star Trek. I like it when they kind of do this sort of thing. They take two very simple concepts and just marry them together to make something obvious. So obvious you think, well, why has no one thought of this before? Because it was outlawed or something. But, you know, they're at war. Why don't they do this sort of thing? Desperate measures? Why don't they deploy these against the Founders? You know, I mean, you can't kill them with bullets, but, you know, you could mess them up with bombs or stuff. We've seen that. Not, of course, I'm here advocating the Federation should be starting down a path of extreme violence and terrorist acts, but still, we've seen exactly how loose Starfleet's morals are when they're pushed to the limit, so I'm quite surprised that no one in the Admiralty has suggested this yet. But ultimately, this episode turns out to actually be an episode about Ezri, which is, as I say, it's a weird meandering start. I think from the opening of the episode, it wasn't really certain where it was all going to be focused on. I thought things were a little bit rapey when drunk Ensign Mitchell tries to pull her. And we do get the nice little reveal that when there's the scene where she's being stalked on the promenade, just shortly after Warren's pulled, which was great to see. And Worf was stalking her, but for protection. I mean, it's like, is there something going on there? His feelings about the Daxes being confused now? But instead, no, this is actually an episode about one of her past hosts. And in some respects, this wasn't completely unwelcome. If anything, it's a far better episode than the previous Ezri-centric episode where there was trouble down to Pit. It would have been more satisfying if this had been more integrated with the war storyline. But at least the actual motivation for the killer is that despite being what you think would be out of character, it is for someone who adheres to logic but represses their emotion and is suffering PTSD. This is probably exactly the kind of thing you could see happening, which just goes to show how much Starfleet is really neglecting their officers and how bad a job they're doing, especially across the races. I mean, I know that Vulcans can be a proud people, and so maybe they would have turned it down anyway because, you know, that would have been seen to be a weakness of logic, but nevertheless, after all these times, the Starfleet's not being constantly at peace, so you'd have thought they'd have figured it out by now. But there you go, that's Starfleet. We know exactly how well they do with their mental health care, which is to say, terribly. But it was nice to see Ezri's actually seeing Joanne. That's probably actually more a slightly less interesting concept than the other things that were in this episode, like the teleporting bullets and the Vulcan gone mad. But yeah, it was nice to see Ezri actually developing some strength for herself and bringing her along. Again, it's an episode that I think maybe would have been better if it had been in an earlier season, but she didn't exist because of contract reasons in earlier seasons, so here we are. And yeah, it was an entertaining little episode, and it was really lovely to see Ezri actually go all kick-ass. I didn't actually expect her to shoot the Vulcan, but yep, no, she did. Didn't expect her to finish him off either, and she didn't, and that's to be more expected, but no, she went properly kick-ass, and that was really cool. The only strange thing really is the way the episode ends, which is without any input from Sisko or Odo or anything. It just sort of ends with Ezri saying goodbye to Joanne, and yeah, I mean, given that it sort of meandered its way about, I thought there's some sort of end cap would have been given, but there we go. So I don't know if this episode had a number of different ideas in the planning stage, but I guess ultimately it works, and at least it's been a hell of a lot better than the last 2 or 3 episodes we've seen anyway. Alright then, well, that was the Field of Fire, and it burned that Field of Fire. Let's see what comes next.
Originally, this was going to feature Odo doing the investigating, which in some ways is more logical. But
more Columbodo.
Yes, more Columbodo. But yeah, and that would have made a change from all the Ezri episodes. But hey, we've got an Odo episode coming up next, so I guess. Yeah. And yeah, this one at least has some character development for her anyway. She moves on a bit.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't really matter, but hey, the previous Ezri one didn't have any development either, so.
No. In terms of Starfleet neglecting its officers, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I do see where you're coming from, though, that the potential that maybe the Vulcans have declined any offer.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think they'd have been offered much, given how we know they are treating their human officers, if you see what I mean.
I did a bit of research, and Deep Space Nine has a crew complement of between 300 and 2,000.
That's a bit of a between.
It is, and that's Bajoran and Starfleet, with a capacity of 7,000, but presumably it's only in sort of emergency. So, yeah, generally we're used to it being 300, I guess, since the war it's gone up to 2,000.
Because of all the people on the ships.
Yeah. So I think that's what that's a reference to.
Which is fine if we'd seen them.
Yeah, well, we're never going to see several thousand people.
No, but half the time the station doesn't look full.
No, it doesn't look that full. Right, let's move on to our next episode, which is Chimera.
Destiny There's something behind us. Is catching up with Odo. It's a changeling. The truth
Bothers me that he thinks that you're not happy here.
can be denied no longer.
You've been pretending to be a humanoid for so long, it doesn't even occur to you that you can be anything else.
But to be a true changeling,
That's what I am.
will Odo abandon his true love?
Let's leave here, Odo.
On the next Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
So the title comes from the beastie in Greek mythology that had 3 different heads, which apparently is a reference to Lars being able to take any form, which doesn't make any sense to me, but never mind. Apparently that's why they went with it. O'Brien and Odo are returning from a conference and haven't been kidnapped.
That's because the Romulans are on their side, that's why.
Yeah, it's all changed now. Mind you, the Dominion did a bit of that as well with Bashir before. So.
That's true.
Odo has brought prezzies for Kira, O'Brien hasn't for Keiko, and offers to buy one from him. With what, dear Liza? Dear Liza, dear Liza. Never mind, let's move on. Their runabout is overtaken by a space gribbly, which isn't a bad CG
Space
design.
squid?
Yes. It enters their ship and reveals itself to be a changeling. And we get to play Who Are You? Yes, folks, did you work this one out? It's J.G. Hertzler. He put the rumour about that it was his reclusive twin brother that was playing Lars, and some people still believe him to this day, apparently.
Dear. Right.
The logic was the producers wanted someone who they could rely on to hold their own with Rene, basically.
Yeah, fair enough.
And Hertzler apparently based his speech patterns on William Shatner's performance as Kirk.
Nice.
I didn't quite get that, but anyway, that's what he was aiming for. It's certainly a very different performance, anyway, to Hertzler's credit.
Yeah.
So, you know, he's an actor.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our teaser. Oda recognises him to be one of the 100 changelings sent out into the galaxy, like what he was.
Yep.
The new changeling, who we find out is called Lars, is cautious around humanoids, having lived amongst them far longer before launching out on his own. Oda says that the humanoids aren't all the same, but in a critique of Star Trek's limited alien makeup, Lars points out that they aren't that different beyond a few bumpy foreheads and wrinkly noses.
I like that.
Ooh, a bit on the nose there, literally. We find out Lars had a special lady friend as well, but it didn't work out because she wanted children, something which makes Odo think. When they link, Lars learns that the only reason Odo hasn't rejoined the Founders is Kira, who's clearly a bit not that they linked, I guess, understandably.
Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't work out too well before, did it? So it's understandable that she doesn't like the idea.
But I think it's more than that. I think it's she knows that it's intimate, and she's jealous of the intimacy, but also she can't share it because they're not the same species.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that one of the things that, of the many things the episode plays on, is one of them is that none of the other people on the station can understand what linking is. They know that it's intimate, and they kind of equate it with sex. But as he says, it's as natural as talking for changelings themselves, and it's actually part of their natural state. So yes, it's very intimate, and you can understand the jealousy, but changelings are not supposed to be existing as separate entities.
Mm-hmm. Well, he points out that Odo's limiting himself for the sake of fitting in with the humanoids. He becomes fire at one point, then fog, which creeps everybody out and pisses off some Klingons. One of them goes to stab Lars, but the other gets kidnapped by him.
Oh, I love this, though, because he turns around and says, "Mine's bigger."
Yeah. That's sort of an overreaction, it has to be said, though. As Odo points out, rather unhonourably, the Klingons are filing charges.
Yeah.
And we get another of those lovely scenes between Quark and Odo, where truths are told about humanoids' intolerance of the other. Quark amusingly points out this is not a time for changeling pride. Kira points out that Odo was always chosen to be a man, and that's who she's fallen in love with, but Odo doesn't know if that's who he truly is. She releases Lars, telling him to go to a rendezvous with Odo, and then lies to Sisko about him escaping. Blimey.
But she lies in a convincing way. She says he became plasma energy, and you think, well, actually, why couldn't he have done?
Mm-hmm. Guess where Odo finds Lars?
Let's get back to the cave.
Of course. We can't go more than one episode without the cave. He points out Kira loves him so much that she's willing to let him go, which is sweet. And so Odo will be returning to her. And we return to Kira praying for Odo, which is sweet as well. He turns into a light show apparently based on the Aurora Borealis, blah, 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 blah. It's got lower and lower lights.
Aurora Borealis shining down in Dallas. Can you picture that? Can you picture that? Can you picture? You gotta see it in your mind. Can you picture?
Anyway, that somehow gives her happy times, apparently. I've clearly been doing it wrong all these years. Renee was so impressed with her orgasmic acting at this point. He was like, oh, wow, I didn't know it was that good. And yeah, it's a bit of a sort of odd ending, as to be said. It's a bit of an odd story in many ways. It's obviously vaguely related to the Dominion arc, because here we have a changeling. And it is very related to Odo's character development as well. So it does have reasons for existing, which perhaps aren't immediately evident, but will become more evident.
Yeah, it does play out.
Yes.
But also, it has an awful lot to say about prejudice as an episode. So where, Odo's talking about, do you think that he's going to get a fair trial? Could just as easily be said by a black person of an all-white jury. But it did make me think of Odo. Are you only now beginning to understand why Bajorans didn't trust the Cardassian justice system? So potentially there's growth there for his character. And I think as well where he says, you've changed to fit in, taking a different marginalised group, people with autism. Yeah, so you've got an argument there of people pretending to be like the mainstream culture in which they're living and making themselves like that rather than being who they truly are. And so Odo, you have coming away from this experience now being himself with Kira. And the argument, I suppose, is that without Lars, neither he nor she would have actually consciously realised that Odo was not being himself.
I mean, in some ways it doesn't make any sense that he's a light show at the end, though. Surely he should have just gooped all over her, which admittedly wouldn't look very, very pretty, but would be more realistic, because that's his natural form, isn't it? His natural form isn't light.
No, but I think...
that's him effectively masking again, isn't it? But...
Well, no, because Lars was fire and Lars was fog, and now that he's seen Lars do those things and has linked with Lars, he's aware that he doesn't have to be... He can be things that are very different. Bearing in mind, Kira will have seen him as goo, because he has to regenerate every however many hours. So the goo isn't new to her. The goo isn't something that she's...
But my point is, it's his natural form. I thought that was kind of the point they were trying to make. Who's going to be able to be...
Yeah, but it's more than that. He is a changeling. He can be many forms, and he's being a form that is very, very different to anything that up until now she has experienced. That's what I took away from it, anyway.
Originally, Lars would have persuaded Odo that all humanoids are racists, and Odo was going to leave with him. And then it took Sisko being honest enough to admit that, yes, humanoids were indeed racist, for the Constable to then decide to stay. Which doesn't make a great deal of sense, does it?
No.
So, glad they moved away from that one.
I am, but I think... What bothers me about this is when Lars says, I know you only really stay for Kira, otherwise you be with your people. For me, that undermines the fact that Odo... in the episodes we've seen, takes a principled stand against the aggression of the Dominion.
Yeah, although it's quite often it's their treatment of her specifically that makes him really bridle. So the one where she's on the planet with him of the Changelings, I think it was the start of season 3, yes. It's really the threat that she's under that makes him decide that no, he can't stick around with them. So yeah, he's got a principled position that he's not going to have anything to do with the war, but actually what it boils down to is because it's going to affect Kira adversely.
Okay.
Anyway, we never hear of Lars again, although that wasn't necessarily by design. It was just the fact that they ran out of time. Basically, they did kick around the idea of bringing him back again, but they've only got about 12 episodes at this point, so not a lot of opportunity for that.
But then also, he says, when I find another changeling, I'll get back to you. Well, given how long it was before they found each other. actually, you can well believe that it would not happen.
Crop up again.
Yeah.
So it's all right, but it still doesn't really move things on much. But it, again, like the previous episode, an okay story that I can live with, basically.
For me, I think it's in the wrong place because I'm wanting the arc. And I think this needs to happen at a certain later point. In other words, it couldn't happen too early because you've got to have had the founders and the war has to be a thing. So I suppose we're thinking maybe season 5-ish this could be.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel right at the end of the season, but I think it's a very good exploration of various forms of prejudice, not just racism, and acceptance, and Odo as a changeling. And although it's done through Kira and the relationship with Kira, it could, in theory, have been done at an earlier point with either with Kira or other friends that he's got. I think it's good as a confronting prejudice. I think as well it's good for. I think it's easy for us as viewers, if we're not shown him changing, to forget how different Odo is. And it's easy for us as viewers, I think, sometimes to forget his nature. And so I think it's good for us to be reminded that he is choosing to look like a humanoid, which is not the same as being one. So I like the episode. I thought it had a lot of merit. I just wouldn't have myself put this in season 7.
Yeah, I think I don't have a problem with that.
What did Doreen have to say? She says, "This was interesting, not about the war, but interesting. Because Star Trek is family science fiction, it was perhaps a little limited in how interesting it could be. But it brought up interesting ideas about looking after ecosystems and human being very limited in our acceptance of difference. And I think it said a lot about the human condition and how we can never know what's going on inside another being precisely because we are monoforms and can't link with each other like shapeshifters do. But do metaforms really know any more about the form they mimic, as they're only mimicking the outside shape and form? Well, they're experiencing what they experienced, or at least Lars was when he was with that herd of whatever it was. He was sharing their experiences as well. He wasn't being one of them on his own. He was part of the herd. So I think they are, some of them at least, are going more one step beyond.
One step beyond!
But the extent to which the founders in particular routinely live the experience of other creatures, I don't know. But Lars did. That's my thought anyway. And she says, "I liked the ending where Odo points out how close-minded Lars is. And because he's decided he knows everything about humanoids, he's stopped accepting new experiences and facts. So actually, he knows very little of humanoid nature." I think that's true.
Yeah. Thank you, Doreen. Lamarck says this, "Chimera, all we're here, we're shapeshifters, get used to it. Frankly, I didn't expect that. It's a gay panic metaphor. Did we just get a 44-minute gay, alien goo romance with linking? So we have Lars, never heard of Garman Hertzler. He's a good actor. What else has he been in? I know him from somewhere. Wait, he's J.G. Hertzler. Damn, do I feel dumb. I did not realise till after. It's a very good performance. Plus, he's covered in a lot of makeup in both roles. So.
Yeah.
Lars feels like an Odo that was left far too long and broke when his Kira left. So as much more practice at most things a shapeshifter can do, like be missed, but he's never linked. Lars faces humanoids with cynicism that's understandable, and one could argue that Odo faces humanoids with a naivety that's equally understandable simply because his interactions haven't yet become jaded over such a long period of time. Or perhaps it's just that Odo got the luckier draw compared to Lars. But this one did provide a debatable, did Odo, the apex of Constable Objective Lawman, conveniently ignore the death of the Klingon, which was probably manslaughter, to assuage his own guilt over convincing Lars to remain on the station for his own selfish feelings of loneliness? All of a sudden he rejects any notion of impartiality on the part of the magistrate out of hand, as if there was no notion of law in the Federation. He then aids and abets in the fugitive escape and ignores Kira's actions in the matter as well. Well, I don't know. All the way through I'm going, yeah, but the Klingons attacked first. They stabbed him in the gut, for heaven's sake. I can't quite understand why everybody's being so anti-Lars over this situation. Particularly, I mean, woo, he's been Fog. Oh no. And they had how many complaints about that? Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway. Given that Lars simply absorbed the Klingon's knife, there was no need to kill something in self-defence if the attacker can't harm the defender. So was Odo making the excuse that the Klingon reached for his disruptor? No easy answers here. Admittedly, it is an overreaction on Lars's...
But you can understand it, it's instinctive, and they provoked it.
Yeah, and particularly with it being Klingons as well, like the point that, they're pressing charges now? They never do that.
No, they don't.
I wouldn't go as far as calling this episode the all-time favourite of Star Trek, but undoubtedly it is a forgotten great one. Yeah.
I think that's true, actually. I think it is a very good episode, and I do think it gets forgotten, and I think the reason it gets forgotten is because it's in the wrong place.
I have found a lot of those in this Deep Space Nine rewatch of the bOrgCast that I can only ever be thankful for. Oh, thank you, sir.
Glad to be of service. We're on the MP3s now.
We is.
Ooh, we got then. I never remember how you do it. Llama, 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 llama. God.
Llama God's Log Supplemental. Have you seen this boy? Yep, finally, after nearly 7 years, the producers of Star Trek Deep Space Nine finally embraced the Tier 1000-ness of the Changelings and have someone stabbed through the heart. And we know exactly who's to blame, and we're not going to go down that line again. But yeah, so here we go. Unlike the previous episode, this one was slightly less meandering at the start, and the moment the space whale, turned out to not actually be horny and trying to hump the ship. Yeah, the moment we discovered that it's a Changeling, we knew this was going to be an Odo-centric episode, and indeed it was. If it hadn't been for the credits, it would have been bugging me throughout the entire episode who was playing Loz, and it was great that Hertzler was actually credited with a different first name, but because I'm paying a tiny bit of attention, it's like, it's him. Very nice, very cool. Yeah, it's good that they're giving some of the guest actors different things to do at this stage. Yeah, so whilst this is an Odo-centric character episode, the previous episode was necessary because we still, at this point, don't really know who Esri is, and we need to form her character so that we can actually care about her before the end. Odo we do know about, but this is an interesting episode because it examines where he is, where his mind is at this point, given where they are in the war, how long he's been separated from his people, his relationship with Kira, and I think this one, whilst not directly dealing with the war, apart from some of the prejudices that arise from it, was pretty necessary in order to actually get an idea of where Odo is before I set into the final stretch of episodes. I mean, there's definitely some interesting things in this episode. Had it not just been a character piece about Odo, then maybe there'd been a few more things they could have touched on. What's interesting is that it does have some very brief things to say about prejudices, with Odo having to pretend to be someone that he isn't, but then actually being happy with pretending to be someone he isn't at the same time. So, I mean, that's a very complicated mental place that a lot of people have to be in the real world anyway, so that would have been something to have actually been interesting to have explored from the usual Star Trek point of view. But of course, this being 90s Star Trek, we're not going to focus on that either. The closest we're going to get to anything that's along those lines is Quark's throwaway mention about changeling pride. And again, Quark was a really great thing about the episode as well, coming in with his speech about how different changelings are to solids, to the bipeds. And it's really nice that Loz actually picks up on the fact that, you're all bipeds, you're all the same, that's why you get on with each other, pretty much. Like, yeah, okay, yeah, yes, it's also because it's for budgetary reasons as well, but never mind. But yeah, it is interesting that Quark is the one that comes in and makes those observations. Clearly he's fulfilling his stereotypical bartender role here quite well, because, he is the one who is the observer and the judge of character. But yeah, once again, he's the one to have the insights onto actually how species behave. And that's really nice to see his character, even though he doesn't appear much in the episode. That's the perfect role for him to have played. Sisko's response at the beginning when Odo asks if Loz can stay on the station, that's an interesting one as well, because although Sisko's been clearly a bastard for a lot of the season, there's a definite look about him that he knows that this is the right moral thing to do, but he's torn with other things. But it's just nice to see Sisko even briefly facing that little quandary from, being the good Starfleet officer that he was to someone who's having to serve in a time of war. But of course, the episode climaxes really with Kira letting Odo go, and that's a really sweet moment. And I find myself, even though I knew that he wasn't going to be running off because, he's still got the final half of the season he's got to serve for his contract, but despite that, it was a really touching moment. The Kira was strong enough. I mean, I'm sure that she has let a lot of people go anyway. We know several of her past loves have died, and she's had to say goodbye to people from her time in existence, but it's just another sign of how strong that she is, and that was really lovely. And doubly lovely that that's Odo's moment when he remembers what it is that he feels about the solid and why it's important to him. I mean, you could say that he hasn't completely disregarded Loz's comments about Kira aging and dying in front of him, because obviously he can have his cake and eat it, so he can go and explore later. But still, if you assume that he's not actually being that cold, and it's a nice little bit of character stuff, even if you don't necessarily agree that Kira and Odo are a good thing, and I'm in the parties that think they do, sorry about that. But what I really like is the final scene, which, yes, is cheesy as hell, but I love cheesy romantic things. But more than that, we've seen Loz showing Odo that they can turn into things that aren't just solids, but with a different consistency. I mean, there's all this talk about the solids, but they've stayed solid, but they can also be gaseous, and gassy in a way that most humans would never be able to succeed with, which my wife would be very pleased to hear, I'm sure. But mostly, yes, it's cheesy, he turns into light. I'm sure it's not just light, it's some sort of glowing cloud or something like that. But it makes a really nice counterpoint, because when you see the rest of the Changeling, the rest of the Great Link, they're just a big gooey mess, and potentially that says something about them. That says, despite the fact they have the freedom to be and do anything, whatever they want to, they choose to exist in a clammy, clumpy, amorphous mass, pretty much stuck to the earth, whereas Odo, you could argue, because of his interaction with humans, or Bajorans, has become more enlightened. He rises, his spirit is lighter than that, he is light, which obviously starts lending the whole thing a slightly theological bent. Odo is the angel, the Dominion are those found that have fallen to earth, but it does give some nice imagery, and I do like that. I don't know if that's the producer's intention, or whether they just wanted to make something really cheesy for the end, but I don't care, it resonated for me, and you can read a lot into it, so yeah. So not a perfect pair of episodes by any means, but this second episode especially, I thought it was a nice and timely examination as to where Odo's character is, and I guess it's going to be necessary, because we are heading into the final stretch now, as I've been saying for a while, especially as I can glimpse on the DVD menu, the titles are getting a bit more vague and pretentious, so yeah, we'll be getting into some serious territory next time, I'm sure. Well, 50% anyway. As ever, looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say about these, and until those next pretentious episodes, glory to you and your cast.
Thank you. I think you're right that in some ways it doesn't fulfil its promise, but I'm not sure it could have done any more at the time because it was the 90s. And yes, I'm not sure actually that Quark is fulfilling the bartender role, and he's the one who comes through and says, look, you're different, they don't like it. I see it more as reminding me of the scene between Quark and Garak, where, you know, the Federation, they're so insipid, and do you know what I mean? I think actually Quark is an outsider.
Yeah.
And so he has that perspective, and I think that's why he's the one who says it. And in terms of the gas versus goo, I think you might be onto something, that the founders have stagnated and they're choosing to exist as goo when they could be light.
I fear you're reading into it stuff that wasn't there. I think the original plan was that he was going to be goo, and then they realised that would just look yuck.
Okay.
So they went with a light effect instead because they thought that would look nice.
Okay.
I think that was their primary motivation. Sparklies.
Okay.
Doesn't quite explain why it gives her the happy times, but there we go.
Well, maybe the gas is going into places.
It's not a gas, he's lights. Anyway.
Well, I don't know.
It is sweet the way Kira lets him go. That's a very strong moment for Kira.
Let him go.
No. Alright? Just no. And, I did this episode, whilst it isn't an arc-plotty thing for the Dominion arc, is very much necessary for Odo for setting things up later on.
Yeah, and it will play out, so yeah.
Drew and Tracy.
This is our feedback for Chimera.
I'm not quite sure what I feel about Lars.
When
he first kind of came into it, he was like, it's another one, and he's like he's going to be a pal of Odo's, but he turned out to be
He's prejudiced. He's prejudiced.
Yeah, basically.
And he's a git.
Yeah, yes, good word for it.
Yes,
yeah.
That's not the word I wrote, but he does end in IT.
Shit.
Yeah, that's right.
I'll say it for you.
You know, he's prejudiced. You know, when he was saying about, you're
you
just
shouldn't hide
missing
yourself
the
and stuff
fear
like that.
in your friends' faces. You're just not seeing it. And they only tolerate you, they don't like you. It's like, no, that is all incorrect.
No one has ever made Odo feel that he cannot be himself.
I mean, a part of it, you said about how Odo, at the beginning of the episode, said to him that I'm asking you to let him Lars go free.
That's what I wrote down. I said, the fact that he went to Ben and said, I'm asking you to let him be freed, and Ben said, I'm going to entrust him into your care. And I said to you, Odo never asks for anything.
He doesn't.
And he also never puts himself out there unless he knows that there's a valid case. Like, he put his trust in him, didn't he?
He did. And Ben was like, he said, I can't release him because it's not good, we're at war with your people. But when he asked him that, he said, okay, I will do. So that shows how much respect they have got for Odo.
Absolutely.
That proves Lars wrong. No,
absolutely.
I thought Lars was a git.
So it's good to see
that
the word of Martok, but not the actor, was in this one, because that would have been interesting and quite complicated.
I know. We was watching it and I was just like, I know this guy. And I had to look it up on the old Memory Alpha. It's J.G. Hertzler, isn't it? He plays Martok.
I didn't get it at all, but you were like, I know him. But then,
his face.
As soon as she said it was Martok, I was just like, I can't fucking hear anyone.
And
Martok
also,
now.
quite often, he was using Martok's voice in little bits. It was obvious once you knew.
So we did have a conversation about whether Odo was being oversensitive after Lars killed the Klingon.
Yes.
And we were like, well, is it right that he should stand up for what he is? And he was being very defensive to Ben.
He was, yeah.
But then now, obviously, you see that Lars was kind of trying to trick him to say that everyone is kind of making you be what you are not, and you're not being true to yourself. When actually, he is true to himself.
I do think Lars is being an arse, but all this, the Klingons, he used deadly force and he should have used self-defence.
Yeah,
that does not sound like Klingons. I'm sorry, I agree with Odo on that whole thing of they're just being gits as well, the Klingons. I'm sorry, I agree on Odo on that bit of it.
Because one of them got killed and it was by a changeling. And to be fair, it wasn't in self-defence because...
Yeah, but they just... All this, if that was any other race and, they got killed, they'd be go, oh, well, he died an honourable death. But because it's this changeling, they're like, oh, he shouldn't have used deadly force. It's like, what?
Maybe. I do like the way the Klingons hiss, though. When Odo had that guy, went...
It did like a cat.
All right, you're a vampire now, are you? I quite enjoyed this.
I thought it was excellent.
Yeah.
And once again, Star Trek episode, it was exploring great themes and that. It's great. I also loved it at the end, Kira, her love for Odo releases him, and then that makes Odo realise that that's his place to be because he realises that Kira loves him.
With Kira and that is the power. But I did say to you at the end when he was being this little
whatever it was,
but I was like, but that reinforces the fact that she's shagging an alien.
Yes, I know.
So it kind of brought it a little bit home, but she was enjoying herself.
Yeah, no, it was great.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this Star Trek episode because it was Star Trek at its best.
I do like Odo anyway.
It's great.
It was never going to be a bad one, was it?
Nope.
Anyway, leave it there.
Yes.
Crack-a-lackin'. See you later.
Bye.
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 Yeah, I think you're right that Lars is an arse.
He is, but he's also right.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole point about as soon as he starts being a gas, people take umbrage. Well, why is that a problem? It's only a problem because, as he points out to Odo, the only reason you're accepted is because you constantly take human form.
Although they all know that his friends know that he's a changeling, and they know that he's goo. And I think that Drew and Tracy are right, that Lars is wrong when he says they're not really your friends and they don't really accept you. Because I think they would accept Odo specifically.
I'm not sure. I think they accept Odo because Odo conforms. And, I mean, even Kira says, I love you for the man you are. And Odo says, well, is that actually me? I mean, there's a whole issue
but they haven't, in that case then, they haven't been given the opportunity to accept Odo as anything else. But they know he's a changeling.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas...
But the point is, he's a changeling who will conform in order to fit in with them. Is that always fair?
No.
So that's kind of the point that Lars is making. I mean, yes, he is being an arse as well.
Yeah.
He's doing it, but then he's had several hundred years of experience of being rejected by humanoids.
Yeah.
He's understandably pissed off with them and doesn't really want anything to do with them. So it is Star Trek because you can see both points.
Yeah.
That's always a good sign with a Star Trek episode, that you're not coming down on something one side or the other. There's wrong and right on both sides, and it's being explored in a very sci-fi concept way with these beings that can share. I mean, struck me when I was watching it this evening. We really hadn't seen a character like Odo before that was so alien. There isn't just a group of bumpy foreheads.
Yeah.
Obviously, we hadn't seen one before because they didn't really have the ability to do the effects before. But nevertheless, he's arguably Trek's most alien up to this point. And that's rather refreshing, really. So.
It is. I mean, the only ones we'd ever come across before were in early Next Gen. You sometimes got very, very aliens briefly.
Yeah, no, they weren't regular characters, though.
No, not regular characters, but there were these ones that lived in vats at one point or something.
Yes, there would be one episode wonders like that.
Yeah, so it's...
And let's not dwell on the fish people.
No, but what I mean is more that the idea that there are more aliens out there was there.
It was just hinted at rather than featured in a big way.
There wasn't a person. There wasn't an actual character of any regularity that you could know.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. What did Purry make of this one?
Hello again, Purry here to talk about Chimera. Now, this episode, so in this one we've got a couple of things. I mean, the thing with this episode is, and again, like I said in the last one, anywhere else you'd have probably called this a pretty decent episode. Part of the problem is having this, oh look, a whole load of changeling stuff would have been better maybe at the beginning of Series 3, Series 4, where you probably just after, not long after the search actually, where we need Odo to know about the Dominion, but having this idea of other changelings would have worked better earlier then. As it is, we've seen quite a few changelings now. Now, that's not to say I was really impressed with some of the stuff they did. They really tried to push the boat out into what a changeling could do. Him turning himself into mist, turning himself into something on fire, turning himself into a space fish. All these things were kind of cool, and indeed stuff that we'd not seen previously or even really thought they could do. None of us knew a changeling could survive vacuum. I wasn't sure if they'd freeze solid or something, so that's a nice to know, or terrifying to know, since technically if any of the founders know this stuff, why wouldn't they? Could we just have founders flying through space? A founder gets onto the station, how largely walks, which is kind of a terrifying thought when you think about it. They didn't think about it though, sadly. No one said, hell, we could have founders just roaming about, jumping onto spaceships. Yeah, that's a thing. Instead, what they do is they find a changeling who's one of the 100 like Odo who was sent out. He's been around longer, but he's really grown to dislike solids. And the only thing that's actually keeping Odo from running away with him to outer space to find other changelings is the fact that Odo loves Kira. Now, what's interesting here is there is obviously, and it kind of gets a wee bit heavy-handed, but there's obviously a kind of there's definitely a gay rights sort of metaphor here. Changeling as homosexual. The fact that Odo was hiding, and very much that no, they like you providing you pretend not to be. And indeed, at the time, if you think about this, in the late 90s, there were still a lot of people who well, you still get people today who say, oh, I don't mind gay people, providing they don't rub my face into it. And indeed, there is that point where Lass says, link with me. And Odo's like, on the promenade, where everyone can see us. And he's like, well, you're ashamed of it. And that's very much like a public kissing thing. Of course, if you take that metaphor, then Odo has definitely cheated on Kira. I don't think anyone really brings it. It's not important. And, I think if I went to my wife and said, yeah, by the way, I spent most of last night snogging someone, but it's okay, it was a bloke, I don't think that's going to be much help. So, I've been having an affair for the past year, but it's okay, it's with another man, so it's fine. That wouldn't come off well at all if I said something like that. I haven't, by the way, if anyone's listening. So, yeah. This episode's actually solid. There's nothing against this. We've got a good trek, aliens as metaphor for things, and you do have Odo suddenly realising that maybe he isn't as accepted as he thought, although we have seen this before. But it's run quite well with the metaphor for normal thing. The concept of Lass and his sort of different experiences colouring his relationship, and indeed the idea that he is going out there just to find the other changelings, is really interesting. But, and I hate to really harp on about this, but this would have been good in, like, say, beginning of third season. Now, once again, and pray tell, how does this deal with the Dominion War? It's referenced offhand, but it's very much to explain why we know he isn't one of the founders, why some of Odo's things. It's almost, look, we're just putting this stuff to bed because basically we've dusted off a season 3 script we didn't look at. So that sort of thing, this is getting quite annoying now, that I really wanted this last season to be more focused, and so far, every time it seems like it's going somewhere, it runs into a brick wall. So it's kind of frustrating, and I think it's making me harsher on the episodes because I'm wanting them to be doing something more, which they aren't. But you never know. The next two, well, one of the next two is Badda-Bing, Badda-Bang. So that is definitely not advancing the story in any way, shape, or form. But I think Latin, which is the other one, does do something. So I will look forward to that. So do keep up the good work. I do look forward to the next thing, and hopefully the arc plot kicking off again, but I shall not hold my breath. But I do look forward to the podcast as always. So do keep up the good work. But until then, bye for now.
Bye! Yes, got to agree with you that it should have been earlier on.
Yep.
Which I think is a valid point.
Yeah. It just occurred to me, though, not only have you pointed out that if the founders can be like space squid or whatever, they could just turn up.
Mm-hmm.
But if they can be anything, why are the founders not spaceships?
Yeah. Well, they tend to be organic rather than metal stuff, don't they? I can't think of an example.
Except Odo's got a load of metal shit in his quarters, and they form and become metal.
That's true, and he's like turned his hands into like piston things before now.
And you had him...
but then I'm not sure he'd be able to, have a thrust or anything. You know what I mean?
Well, you say that. They can be gas. Collectively, could not the Link be a fleet of spaceships?
Oh, I think that's stretching it. I could imagine them all being a fleet of space gribblies, which would,
Space squid.
Yeah.
Or the Poos from Tin Man.
Yeah, but even if they formed metal spaceships, they wouldn't, if somebody fired on them, they wouldn't be metal. They'd just be in the shape of metal, so they'd be far more vulnerable than they're actually in a spaceship.
You fire at a changeling and it just goes through, doesn't it?
No.
Like, when there was that scene on the promenade, and I can't remember the episode, and someone fired at Odo, and
he made a hole in himself, but I mean, fire enough shots, and there's nothing they can do about that. Yeah. I think it just about makes sense that generally they're in spaceships for their own good, but if they're just out exploring like Lars was, then they can be space gribblies if they want to.
But then also you've got, like, here's a new thing. If a founder is on a ship and the ship is getting shot at, why doesn't the founder become a space gribbly and bugger off?
Try and run away, yeah.
Make themselves their own escape pod.
Yeah, they could do in extremis, but again, there's a danger of them being shot, so... Yeah.
But if they're little and the ship that's being shot at is big, actually, I would argue that
they might escape that way. I mean, yeah, but I don't think it's particularly come up before now. So
I'm not convinced that Odo necessarily has cheated on Kira, because I think one of the things that this episode is supposed to make you realise is that solids and changelings are very, very different, and there are things that just don't. That you can't be shared as an experience. I'm not convinced there is actually an equivalent of being in the Link. In the same way as Odo says it's as natural as talking.
The problem is that it isn't supposed to be sex, but the way they play it quite often is quite sexual and, I mean, like, hence the end of this episode we got Kira going all gooey. We also had, when Odo was with the Alpha Changeling, that those were played like sex scenes, even if actually they weren't supposed to be.
Well, maybe they are in a way, but in the same way as you've got Bolians with co-husbands, maybe monogamy makes fuck all sense for changelings.
It certainly doesn't, does it? No, that's against the whole concept of the Great Link. But
so therefore,
you could argue that it's so different to sex that actually he's not cheating on Kira because he's doing something completely different, I think a different level, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's to do with his species and how his species are.
Yeah.
Which it's not just that she can't do. I mean, it's very, very different because they are different species, and it's about how they naturally are. Is possibly the best way I can think of explaining it. But I get where you're coming from in the way they've shot it, but I'm just not sure it is actually cheating, and I'm not sure it is actually an equivalent.
Well, we seem to have covered a lot of ground, haven't we, this evening? A lot of serious business. Next time we're recording on Friday the 21st of September. And as Purry says, we'll be covering Latin, or Inter Arma Enim Silent Liges. I think I'm going to stick with Latin, to be honest. But yes, it is. From what I remember, more related to the arc plot. And then there's the last one-shot comedy episode with Badda-Bing, Badda-Bang.
Oh, is that Ocean's DS9?
It's Ocean's DS9, yes, which I remember being quite fun, so that's alright. Cool! So we'll catch you next time. Thank you to everybody who's fed back this time.
Thank you!
Take care, cheery bye!
Bye!
One step beyond!
Music at the beginning of this podcast was produced by the 86th Floor on YouTube and is used with their kind permission. All music referenced is for illustrative purposes only, and no copyright infringement is intended.
Find our website at bOrgCast.libsyn.com.
And we have a YouTube channel as well.
You can find the bOrgCast playouts on Spotify for your listening pleasure.
Visit our Tumblr site at bOrgCast.tumblr.com, where you'll find images accompanying the episodes discussed in this cast.
Send emails or MP3s to bOrgCast@gmail.com.
Or you can contact us via Twitter on rev_org or bOrgCastAmmo. #bOrgCast.
Just do it!
Shut it down!